After a brutal start to this season where Joel Embiid played minimal games, and when he did, he just simply did not look like his old self, the Philadelphia 76ers have finally decided to shut him down for the season. A lot of the reports suggesting that this might be the big one, the one that ends Joel Embiid's career, more or less. This is something that has been anticipated pretty much from the moment Embiid was drafted, but now that we're finally here, man, it really sucks. Hello everybody, welcome to Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like if you have not already, and check us out over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you want to enjoy this as an audio-only experience. But with that said, let's talk about Joel Embiid and the Philadelphia 76ers. I both want to talk about the past, present, and future, so let's just go in the linear order there. Let's talk about the past. When Joel Embiid was drafted by the Sixers and initially was hurt on draft night, he probably would have been the #1 pick in the 2014 NBA draft had he not had the injury going into it and the injury concerns overall, because Embiid is a big guy. He is a very, very big guy, which obviously has impacted his offensive game and just his game in general and made him a very, very good player. But at the same time, that very body that made him so good is one that has consistently betrayed him. Not only did he miss his first season in the NBA, he ended up missing his second season in the NBA, and he kind of just became a wild card. I remember watching his debut against the Oklahoma City Thunder and being mind blown by just how far along this guy was, because while I knew he was a highly touted prospect, I wasn't quite aware of the degree of skill the guy had. I knew he was big, I knew he could score the ball, I knew he was a pretty good defender and rebounder, but holy shit, from the minute that Joel Embiid was in the NBA, he was exceptional. I believe he hit like 2 3-pointers in his debut. I don't even think going into it, people anticipated him being a 3-point shooter at all. But when he got drafted in 2014, he watched the tides of the NBA transfer over and he adapted accordingly. Kind of an awkward situation because 2 of their most prominent young players also played the center position in Nerlens Noel and Jahlil Okafor, but eventually those guys kind of phased out of the league altogether on other teams. But Joel Embiid is the franchise player for the Philadelphia 76ers. Then, after his rookie third season, where he plays 30-ish games, Sixers still end up not being very good. They win more of their games when Embiid plays, but it's limited. As a result, they get the #1 pick and draft Ben Simmons. This is where the problems begin for the Joel Embiid era, because while I do completely understand why they took Ben Simmons #1 overall, it's also Ben Simmons is just a terrible fit next to Joel Embiid. Not even, using the benefit of hindsight and the future that happens there. I just simply do not think the play style of Embiid and Ben Simmons was one that paired well together, because Ben Simmons is a great playmaker and downhill threat, but he's a non-3-point shooter. Meanwhile, Joel Embiid is primarily a post-up threat, primarily a paint guy, and because of that, he is not really going to aid in Ben Simmons' game. Even if he is shooting threes, he's not shooting threes at a volume that suggests like he's Karl Anthony Towns or anything like that. No, this is a side project, a small aspect of his game, not the foundational aspect. So the fact that they are both foundationally paint players and their play styles are not parable. Like, you can have 2 players who are primarily paint players, especially a ball handler and a big man, but if your big man is not really much of a pick and roll guy, and your ball handler, they can drop like crazy on the pick and roll and make it really hard to use that effectively, well, just the 2-man action is inherently broken up there, and it becomes more just my turn, your turn. And as a result, I just never really liked that duo. Really more than good enough to finally get the Sixers into the playoffs. And then fast forward to 2019, they add Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris to the team, and that was great because Jimmy Butler, contrary to Ben Simmons, I think fit perfectly next to Joel Embiid. I think that was a pairing, a match made in heaven. He still has his 3-point issues, but he's a far more versatile player. He still can shoot threes. He still has a jump shot in general. Defenses respect him as a scorer considerably more. So love the Jimmy Butler edition. Where they went wrong is in the offseason. First of all, there was whoever that guy was allegedly on the Sixers staff who said that they were afraid they couldn't control Jimmy Butler because he had developed a bit of a reputation at this point, which Jimmy used as motivation to go to Miami. But beyond just that, Ben Simmons should have been traded and Jimmy Butler embraced immediately. So that should have been the off-season game plan because Ben did not look good in the postseason, and it's because the ball was not in his hands. Ben was the type of player who really was just not all that good in terms of his offensive production unless he consistently had the ball, because when he doesn't have the ball, he's not a floor spacer and he's not really the greatest cutter or backdoor type of guy. So ultimately just kind of ends up sitting in the dunker spot and not being all that helpful and mucking up the spacing, getting in Joel Embiid's way on his matchups when he's trying to get to the rim, getting in the way of Jimmy Butler's drives by bringing another man into the equation. They should have traded Ben Simmons at that exact point, and that should have been the end of the problem. It was not. Instead, they lost Jimmy. They kept Ben. They signed Al Horford to try and make up for the Jimmy Butler loss. Al Horford, probably the worst basketball Al Horford's played in his entire career, was in Philadelphia, because the idea that he could play power forward, you were like 2 years too late for that by the time 2020 had rolled around. Like, he was officially in the needs to play center category, just not as mobile of a 4 as you would like. 3-point shooting as a 5 is a lot better than a 3-point shooting as a 4. So that was awkward. Then we get to the James Harden era after the debacle in the playoffs against the Atlanta Hawks. Then we get to the trade debacle again. You have Tyrese Maxey break out during this, which that's also like, Tyrese Maxey is great next to Joel Embiid. They had a year where those two paired together were averaging like 60 plus points per game together, and it was fucking awesome. But the pieces around them were never really enough. And throughout this whole thing, Joel Embiid has been getting consistently hurt, and the wear and tear has been building over time. Something that I like to mention about injury history a lot is it's not like because you have an injury history, that means that inevitably the big one is coming. Like, the injury that derails your career for real this time is happening. It's more like throughout the years, all of these injuries accumulate into your body just being far less resistant to dealing with them because it's been taking beatings nonstop over a decade. So now you just don't have the resistance. You don't have the stamina. You can't manage and maintain your body through these injuries in the same way that you used to. Joel Embiid's kind of had this projected expiration date for a very long time in his career because of the lower body injuries. The fact it took him over 2 years to actually even see an NBA floor after getting drafted. And it's not surprising that this is where we are, but that doesn't make it fucking suck any less. Back in the day, back when the Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid duo was founded, I was actually very strongly in the, because a lot of people saw the flaws with the duo and they were trying to break it up pretty much from day one as a result of that. I was very much in the camp of trade Joel Embiid, not Ben Simmons. In fact, I was so committed to this idea that I made an entire My League series based around the premise of what would happen if you built around Ben Simmons. Now, obviously, with the benefit of hindsight, Ben actually had the shorter expiration date on his career, the shorter expiration date on him being a star level player at the very least. So that kind of fell through as an idea. So it's good that they didn't go in that direction, believe me. But it goes to show it wasn't about ability. I mean, part of it was about play style and the era that we're in, because part of me felt like Joel Embiid play style as a post-up big just was not as relevant as, a tall forward who's a great playmaker, defender, and slasher and all that. But the other aspect of it was injuries. I was like, well, Ben Simmons, he's going to be around a while. Joel Embiid's like 28. He's probably going to expire by the time he's like 31, 32. So here we are, and Joel Embiid, I believe, is 31 years of age. Let me confirm that. He is 30, and he is going to be 31 in 2 weeks. His birthday is March 16th. So yes, Joel Embiid is 31. The injuries have caught up to him. And you also have to take into consideration the disaster of the Philadelphia 76ers as they are this year. Not only do you have have this potential career-ending injury happen to your franchise player, which obviously is the end all be all. If that happens, everything else doesn't really matter all that much. On the road to recovery, where you're saying, okay, it's not quite at the drama level of his career is over. So what do we do? How do we pick up the pieces from where we are? Well, you have a maxed out cap sheet. Paul George is making $50 million a year for the next 3 seasons after this one, while being like 37, 38, 39. And he's going to be making that money while having mediocre production. Tyrese Maxey's going to continue to be good and worth the amount of money that he's making, but he's also like lower level second option tier, and you're paying him max franchise player money. So you still are feeling really stretched thin on the financial side of things. Joel Embiid is obviously making the massive amount of money that he is. So there's really no way to build this roster in any other way. You can't trade Paul George. People aren't going to trade for Paul George unless you're like throwing draft capital into the equation, which for the most part, I don't even think Philadelphia really has. So there are so many layers to the level of fuck that the Philadelphia 76ers are, and I really don't see the way out of it. So look at his actual play. He's looked hobbled as fuck. He has looked slow. And the thing that's fucking crazy, and I gotta give Joel Embiid this bit of credit. Even when Joel Embiid looks like he should literally be wearing what you wear at a hospital when you're a patient, even when that's the case, he's still averaging 24 points, 8 rebounds, 4.5 assists, and a block. And he's still doing it on league average true shooting. Now, this is a huge statistical dip from what he averaged last year when he literally was putting up 35 points per game. God damn, Joel Embiid. So that's a 10-point per game dip, 3 rebound dip, 1 assist dip, half a block dip. Like it's all there. The percentages, field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, all of it's down. But he still manages to be a 24, 8, and 5 guy while being the level of hobbled that he is. I can't project the future. I don't know what the fuck is going to happen with Joel Embiid, but let's talk about his legacy. That's something we can project a little. Obviously, if there's still fuel in the tank and he can go probably at this point to another team anyways and win a championship, have a moment, that would be great. But it's really feeling like that's just not going to happen. Feels like the peak of Joel Embiid's career is going to end up being an MVP season that people find extraordinarily contentious. And say what you will about that award, it's controversial and it will be forever. And people will say that he didn't deserve that MVP forever. Is that fair? Not necessarily. Either way, the Joel Embiid year, like his numbers were ridiculous, but there was the association of him just like quote unquote crying for the award, like the here damn MVP award. Wow. It really felt like he campaigned hard for this award. And when you especially contrast that to his opponent, Nikola Jokic, who seemingly throws his MVP in the trash as soon as he gets home from the ceremony, like doesn't give a fuck to a comical degree about individual accolades, it rubs people the wrong way. I think it's a little silly, and I think people are allowed to be motivated by different things, but the degree in which he emphasized MVP over championship rubbed some people the wrong way, and I can understand where that's coming from. The other thing is, like, Philadelphia fans, if you're not a Philly fan and you talk shit about Joel Embiid, they're gonna jump all over you, and they're gonna hate you, and they're gonna give you a bunch of crap. I can tell you from firsthand experience. Even though I've never felt like I was truly in the category of Joel Embiid hater, in the NBA world, fans are irrational enough that if you even say anything remotely critical of somebody, it means you're their hater. So while I've never felt that I was that with Joel Embiid, I've definitely recognized the pattern of behavior from Philadelphia sports fans doing exactly what I just said. But at the same time, Philadelphia sports fans have been kind of mean to Joel Embiid over the years, and especially in recent years, and kind of turned their backs on him, which sucks a lot, because if he doesn't have the love and admiration of Philadelphia fans, and what does he have to show for his career besides for a couple of really good seasons, an MVP award, and like a fan base that remembers his time there negatively because they never got across the hump? There's been a lot of conversation about the process, and like, man, it really just seemed like a championship was supposed to come out of this, and they didn't even make a conference finals. So when you factor all that in, it's really hard not to look at it in a super negative light, even if you can do what I've done recently more so than ever, which is like, look, you actually look into it. The problem is when a player gets hurt to the extent that the consistency in which Joel Embiid gets hurt, eventually that all turns into noise. And a lot of people just think it's an excuse at that point. You go, oh, there's always an injury. Well, yeah. there is always an injury. There is pretty much fucking always an injury that has affected Joel Embiid in the postseason every single year. The last time he was in the playoff was like the healthiest he had been on a playoff run since his early few years. I'm talking he averaged 33 points per game in that 6-game series, which, they lost it. So, you can blame him on that if you want to. That's a really good series. The 4-game sweep in 2020, he averaged 30. In 2021, when they made it to the second round, he averaged 28, but he obviously had some huge number dip-offs in 2022 and 2023. And it's mostly driven by injury. Joel Embiid has proven that when he is healthy, while he might not be quite a playoff riser, he's not a playoff dropper either. He just hasn't really had the opportunity to show that because of the level of injury he's been dealing with. I hate to say this, but I wonder when NBA teams are going to learn their lesson with the Joel Embiid and Kawhi Leonards of the world. I understand it's like a sunk cost fallacy. Once you get invested in them being your franchise player, you're just like, fuck, another injury? Well, I guess we're sitting out another season and trying to retool in the off season and we'll figure it out then. But I'm increasingly getting to a point where I just don't think guys like this are worth dealing with. Like, I fucking hate that this is happening to Embiid, and, I'm not saying the Sixers should kick him to the curb necessarily, but if they did this a year or two ago when his value was at his peak, they might have actually managed to come out of this on the other side extremely strong. I'm not blaming them for not doing that, because I completely understand why they wouldn't. I completely understand why the Clippers are still doing the, hey, you never know, what if Kawhi is healthy for the offseason? I'm even still buying into that to some degree, so I can't blame anyone for doing it. As a franchise, you just can't be spending $50 million a year for guys who are going to play 30 to 60 games and then not be healthy in the playoffs. You just don't want to find yourself in that position. You really, really, really don't, because it ends up leaving. It's worse than the standard NBA purgatory, because at least there's a glimmer of hope in there that can string you along to make you buy into shit that you otherwise wouldn't normally buy into. Like, no one's buying into the Chicago Bulls going on a championship run, but what about the Clippers or the Sixers? Joel Embiid could get healthy and then suddenly there they are, or Kawhi Leonard could get healthy and suddenly there they are, and that is always a really nice hypothetical, but it always ends up being a hypothetical. It sucks, but it always ends up being a theory instead of actually something that is true in practice. So yeah, I don't know what Joel Embiid's legacy is going to be. He's not going to have the most impressive resume by any means, and he's not going to have a ring. And that's the thing, man. When you don't have a championship, there is going to be a subsect of NBA fans that thinks that is just inherently evidence that you sucked. All of it was your fault. There is no context. There is no circumstances. There is no stuff outside of your control. You were one of the best players in the world and you didn't win a championship. That is a personal moral failing and not just a matter of unfortunate circumstances. That's the way a lot of people feel. And though I think more people than not are capable of giving Joel Embiid a little bit of grace, I think there's definitely a lot of people who are, for lack of a better term, happy to dance on the grave of his career. And that's sad, because I have this very basic philosophy. Unless an NBA player does something off of the court really to make me strongly dislike them, there are things you can do on the court to make me strongly dislike you, but it's not too common. But unless you really give me a reason to hate you, I'm rooting for you. Obviously, sometimes you get in a situation where you're rooting for one guy on one team and rooting for one guy in the other, and you have to choose. If everybody could win a championship, that would be cool. Also, it wouldn't, because then it wouldn't mean anything. But like, in terms of just like, when I see an all-time great player, I want that player to win a ring at some point. I want that player to have their legacy forever enshrined in NBA history. And that is the way that people remember. It's always the way that people remember. An MVP season here or there is cool, but a championship is your avenue towards being immortalized. And Joel Embiid just didn't get that. And I don't think he will. Man, that sucks. It really sucks, genuinely. I have been, critical of the Sixers in the process for a very long time, routinely been like, let's pump the brakes on talking about this team winning a championship, because I feel like it just never will happen, and unfortunately it hasn't, but it doesn't make this suck any less. I hate seeing an all-time great talent not reach the heights that he very clearly could have if his lower body was just a little bit more capable of carrying around around this 7'2", 280-pound frame. That's the last thing I'll highlight, man. I've been watching a lot of Joel Embiid highlights ever since this announcement. They've been all over my Twitter timeline. A big thing people have highlighted that just has not been appreciated enough throughout his career is Joel Embiid's like the biggest guy in the NBA. I don't think he's literally weight-wise the heaviest, but he is up there. Meanwhile, he moves so much better than bigs who are 30, 40 pounds lighter than him. The agility that guy has when he's healthy at his size, combined with how skilled he is as a ball handler and a shooter, especially mid-range shots off of the dribble, it's just comical how unguardable the guy was. It's no surprise, really, when you watch his highlights. It's like, yeah, of course this guy has 2 scoring titles. Of course he averaged 32.5 points per game over 3 seasons. He's built for it. No surprise there. Damn. All right, that's it. See you guys later. Bye.